Martial artists and sportsmen admire him for his physical dexterity, power, and speed. Philosophers respect him for bridging the philosophical divide between East and West. But here at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, California, are another group of people who hold Bruce Lee up as an inspiration for their community. The bodybuilders. Gold's Gym is the mecca of bodybuilding. It was here that Arnold Schwarzenegger trained, and where many of the world's champion bodybuilders come to hone their physiques. Flex Wheeler is one of the most successful bodybuilders of his generation, winning numerous titles before retiring in 2002.
Probably two of the biggest things that Bruce Lee was known as far as his physical attribute. One would be his lats, because he had incredible lats, and then also his abs. Another thing also would be from the rear, his back. In bodybuilding, we call it a Christmas tree. So for a person, you know, having a Christmas tree back in that era is just profoundly unknown or unheard of.
Other bodybuilding luminaries, such as Lou Ferrigno, Lee Haney, Dorian Yates, as well as Mr. Schwarzenegger, have all expressed the huge impact Bruce Lee's physique had on them.
There are a surprising number of professional bodybuilders who are Bruce Lee fans. And really it comes down to Bruce's abs. He has a legendary set of abs, deep cuts, incredible serratus muscles, and I think bodybuilders admire that.
In the bodybuilding world, I think Bruce Lee came in and really was one of the first proponents of definition as opposed to just sheer bulk. Because if you look at the bodybuilding champions of that era, they were all just massive. They were just huge. And there was him who really came in and said symmetry, definition, you know, getting cut was the big thing. But that was the first time, it was really with Bruce Lee, that became something to aspire to.
As well as inspiring bodybuilders, Bruce Lee was quick to use their techniques in his own workouts.
He was kind of a pioneer in a number of different things, whether it was his dieting or extra training, but he was one of the first that I knew of that actually incorporated, you know, bodybuilding and bodybuilding type movements into his regime as a martial artist. Back then, even now, they felt that in training and weightlifting, it's going to restrict your ability to punch or your speed or make you kind of slow or stuff like that, where I think he took it to a different level and he made it more sports specific on his actual movements that he did in a gym. They were actually to enhance his ability as a fighter.
The spur for Bruce Lee to start weight training came after a fight in San Francisco in 1965. He just started teaching Kung Fu. When a traditional practitioner of the art heard Bruce Lee was teaching Westerners, he challenged him to a fight. A pregnant Linda Lee was there to witness it.
It lasted about 3 minutes. Bruce got the fellow down to the ground and said, "Do you give up? Do you give up?" And he said, "I give up." So they went back to San Francisco. However, it upset Bruce mightily that he had not dispatched that man in under 3 minutes. And that's when he began to question his physical fitness and his way of martial arts.
Bruce Lee decided to re-examine both his fighting and training methods and began an intensive program of physical conditioning.
He had a program for every single day. So he did aerobic type things. He rode his bike, he rode a stationary bike, he ran, he jumped rope, all those kind of things for aerobic conditioning. And then he did sit-ups forever, because he had the wonderful washboard abs. And he did strength exercising with weights all the time. And he was very specific. He read books on kinesiology, so he would know how to develop his body.
As well as studying the science of human movement, Bruce Lee also designed his own weight training equipment, built by a close friend.
George Lee made a couple things for him that were specifically to develop grip strength and the size of Bruce's forearm. Bruce thought that led to an increase in punching power. But one was a grip that you clench your fist open and shut to work your forearm muscles. It's actually a lot like the stuff you see in sporting goods stores now.
Bruce Lee's training regimen helped him reach high levels of stamina, speed, and agility. It allowed him to perform feats of superhuman strength, such as a 2-fingered push-up, seen here in rare archive footage from a karate tournament in 1967. He also perfected a super fast and powerful blow known as the 1-inch punch.
This guy was probably the fastest person I've ever seen. And he had that strength. I mean, the 1-inch punch, for instance, he would knock you clear across the room.
Lee's speed was legendary. Even when slowed down to a quarter speed, his strike is still hard to capture on camera.
He could stand 5 feet away from you, leap in there and tap you on your face and be back here standing before you could move, before you could intercept it. And then every time they'd say, well, wait a minute, I wasn't ready, do it again. And he'd do it about 2 more times and they'd say, oh, hell, you know, I can't put up with that, you know.
I think a lot of the speed and timing that Bruce Lee had was, from the conditioning and strength and the way his body worked. He was very, very concerned with his fast twitch muscle. That 1-inch punch that he developed, one of the fastest strikes and still used today, and that transfers over, obviously, into the boxing side.
This ability to pack a punch has been acknowledged by some of the world's best boxers.
That was the most amazing thing about Bruce, was the fact that he could generate so much speed and velocity in his punches. Short punches that he used his body and the type of leverage he was able to gain, because he understood the mechanics of the body.
Bruce Lee didn't just confine himself to exercising his muscles. He was also concerned with the fuel he was putting into his body. He began experimenting with high-protein drinks that he blended himself and supplemented with ginseng, royal jelly, and massive doses of vitamins.
He was very known for taking vitamins and minerals and stuff like that, and he had to go and find these various different ones and put them together, where now we can just walk into any store and be able to buy certain supplements like that. So a lot of the things he was doing as an athlete back then is things that we incorporate now as bodybuilders.
Bruce Lee's approach to high-protein drinks was revolutionary and shocked some of his colleagues when he returned to Hong Kong.
At that time, when we were not making movies, we would go to his house. He showed us how he ate beef, raw beef from the US. He put the raw beef into the blender and added milk, 7 eggs, and then wow, he gulped that thing down. We were terrified. It was amazing.
And it wasn't just his high-protein shakes that shocked his friends.
Sometimes he used electric current. He was really mad, giving himself electric shocks voluntarily. He was fighting with the electricity. Of course, we could not do it. I do not know how many volts the electricity was, but he was challenging the electricity.
You know, it's really funny that nowadays, if you go to any professional sports orthopedist place or physical therapist, you go in there and you see them using the electronic stimulation machines to rebuild muscles to help damaged areas. But way before that was employed in any physician's room, you saw Bruce Lee doing that at home on his own. He was just truly a pioneer and way ahead of his time.
Revolutionizing attitudes towards health and physical fitness is just one of the many ways Bruce Lee changed the world. But while the West has been quick to recognize his achievements, it's only recently that China and Hong Kong have begun to embrace their best-known son. Almost 50 years after Bruce Lee arrived in Hong Kong to make his first kung fu movie, his daughter Shannon is returning. She's here to meet former friends of her father's and to promote the Bruce Lee Foundation that she now heads. Film producer Raymond Chow was Bruce Lee's friend and business partner. As head of Golden Harvest Studios, he was the biggest film producer in Hong Kong. Now aged 80, he stopped doing interviews some time ago, but has arranged to make an exception for Shannon, the daughter of a man he first saw on a television talk show nearly 40 years ago.
It's a fateful evening that I watched that, so I decided to call him first thing in the morning. And I'll say that's the beginning of something important in the movie industry.
Bruce Lee changed the way actors were treated by studios by negotiating his own contract and taking a creative role in the writing, producing, directing, and choreography of his films.
You and my father had kind of an interesting and revolutionary relationship for the Hong Kong film industry, right?
Yes, I think that's the only fair way to do it. And it avoid a lot of problems of negotiating things. And Bruce and I the relationship was so close. He didn't want to have that. I didn't want to have that.
The first film Bruce Lee made with Raymond Chow was The Big Boss, about the struggle of the Chinese community in Bangkok.
Thanks, Cheng. Remember your promise. You're on your own from now on. You know, boy, a woman can be a blessing or a ruin to a man.
The Big Boss was a classic example of the way a Hong Kong movie ran at the time, which was fast, cheap, and a little bit out of control.
Having left America to make his name in the East, it was an important film for Lee. It was made on a shoestring budget, and he struggled to turn an incomplete script into a coherent and captivating story. Knowing that the film could make or break him, Bruce Lee sat nervously with his wife Linda at the premiere.
When the film was over, it was perfectly quiet. You could hear a pin drop in that theater, and Bruce is like, oh my gosh, do I make for the exit right now or what? And then all of a sudden it started. The clapping, the cheering, they loved it. They were thrilled, and Bruce was thrilled. It was wonderful. They escorted him outside. They raised him up on their shoulders, and he was their hero from then on.
Also in the audience was a 24-year-old assistant director who was yet to make his first feature film. John Woo would go on to become one of the most influential action movie directors of his generation, responsible for films such as Broken Arrow, Face Off, and Mission Impossible 2.
When the people watch the movie, they didn't know how to react to it because, it's so new and so different. It's so different from other martial arts movie. Maybe Bruce's performance too powerful. And then after they find a real thing, and then they're all very happy and they all cheer and clapping, I think at that moment, at that night, we have found our true hero. And from that night, Bruce Lee became a legend.
Despite costing less than $100,000, The Big Boss smashed all local box office records. But even before the premiere, Bruce Lee had already started working on his next film, Fist of Fury, a film that would help create a sense of patriotism in Hong Kong.
At the beginning of the film, there's this whole thing where they give him the sign saying, Dong Na Beng Fu, sick men of Asia. And he comes back and he says, Hong Kong people. Chinese people are not sick men of Asia. And I think Hong Kong people were like, Hong Kong people are not sick men. They took that message to heart. And they cheered him on. He was really like the prodigal son returning back to be embraced by Hong Kong as a community. But I think that's his place was, he was part of a movement to create an indigenous identity for Hong Kong people, and I think that identity continues to this day.
China in the early 70s was caught up in the Cultural Revolution, which was a hideous, hideous, bloody interlude in modern Chinese history, where hundreds of thousands of people died, children turned on their parents. It was awful. And you had people running away from China, fleeing to Hong Kong and saying, our country is drowning in blood. People couldn't be proud of that China. So instead they were proud of this mythological China, and the place that mythological China came from were movies. It was like buying a ticket to a movie theater. It was like getting a passport to what you knew was in your heart was the real China. And that was one of the things that Bruce Lee saw.
For many Chinese people, the strong character played by Bruce Lee was both revolutionary and inspiring.
We were so weak, and we had been looked down by so many. So after Fist of Fury, they feel they are not sick anymore, and they become strong. It's all because of Bruce Lee.
We are not sick men.
As in The Big Boss, Bruce Lee played a nationalist hero. The character struck a chord with Chinese audiences, so with his third film, Way of the Dragon, he played on the same themes. This fight scene with karate champion Chuck Norris in the Colosseum in Rome is celebrated by martial arts fans as an all-time classic. Once again, Lee plays an upstanding and understated Chinese character that defeats his non-Chinese foe.
It also had encouraged me to make my own film with the real Chinese spirit. You know, that's how I got the influence. You know, and also make me believe if you work hard, you will success. You know, same as Bruce Lee.